Hi, everybody. Welcome again to Ivy English. I'm Bruce.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Wesley.
Whoa, are we close to the end of this year or what? Today's December 30th. We have a reading for you here. The title is Fangyuan, Sea Buffaloes, How an Old Tradition is Turning New Prophets.
好，那我们这个中文标题是芳苑潮间带体验，坐着牛车采蚵去啊。那这个 turn profits 就是这个产生或者是产生的这个利润啊。那通常英文是讲 turn a profit 啊，是单数的，但在这里呢啊，它用复数也没有什么不对的地方啊。但一般我们是讲单数的 turn a profit。Okay,
it is a reading, and that's what I'm going to do. Read through the whole article for you, and then we all go back and sentence by sentence, reread and explain in both English and Chinese each and every sentence. On the western coast of Changhua County lies a small township with a rich historical background. Fangyuan Township is a place that was put on the map by the little saltwater bivalve mollusk known as the oyster. The region is famous for its intertidal zones, where fresh river water mixes with briny seawater. This unique convergence creates an environment which is rich in organic elements and perfect for not only oysters, but fish, shrimp, and crabs as well. The area is also known for the particular way its residents harvest and transport their oysters via the use of sea buffaloes. In the past, local farmers making a living from the sea were unable to properly operate motorized vehicles for oyster harvesting. Instead, they discovered that carriages pulled by water buffaloes were easier to use and much more maneuverable. Over time, this method began dying out, replaced by more modern ones. In the early 2000s, a man named Wei Qingshui decided to turn the declining tradition into a tourist attraction. Visitors board oyster harvesting ox carts and are ferried through the intertidal zones. They can then don rubber boots and gloves and get a chance to also pick their own fiddler crabs and clams from the muddy water during low tide. At the conclusion of the tour, visitors can sample freshly harvested oyster delicacies. Mr. Wei is very passionate about the sea buffaloes and the traditional way of harvesting oysters. He knows that the wetlands in the southwest of the county are crucial for this way of life and has plans to petition UNESCO to grant World Heritage Site status to the wetland ecosystem.
So this is honestly really cool, and now I want to go do this. Anyways, on the western coast of Changhua County lies a small township with a rich historical background. A township is the town plus the land associated with the town. So it's one way of dividing a county into smaller pieces for administrative purposes. And yes.
好，然后我们看到这个地方呢，第一句讲到说，在这个Western Coast 就是西岸在彰化县的西岸lies 就是那里位在那里有一个lies 在这里其实就是 to be situated 有这么一个 small 一个小小的这个乡township 有的时候是镇，那有的时候是乡，那在这里我们知道它是个乡那这个彰化县芳苑乡with a rich 它有一个很丰富的 historical 这个 background 有一个很丰富的历史的背景就具有丰富历史性的一个背景。
Fangyuan Township is a place that was put on the map by the little saltwater bivalve mollusk known as the oyster. So this 地名of Fangyuan Township is a place that was put on the map. Now, everything technically would be drawn on a map, but when we say something put some place on the map, it means make it famous or make it well known for something. And what made Fangyuan Township famous? The oyster, which in biology is called a bivalve. That means it opens and has two halves. And a mollusk is a life form that I think includes a lot of things besides these shellfish, oysters and clams and so on. They're shellfish and also some kinds of worms that are found on dry land or in the sea.
好，这个 mollusk 就是中文讲的软体动物。好，那这个它这里前面那个 bivalve 就是双壳类的，好，所以它是一种双壳类的软体动物。那我们再回来看这个句子，好，他说芳苑乡is a place， 那是个地方，这个地方 that was put on the map。好 ，to put something on the map， 就像刚刚 Bruce 老师讲的，就是 to make a place or a person famous or well known 啊。所以例如你可以说 the story has put the small township on the map 啊，这个故事让这个小镇和小乡镇闻名了啊。所以芳苑乡啊以什么闻名呢？啊 by the little 是一个小小的 salt water， 就是咸水的双壳类软体动物啊 known as 就大家所知道，大家都称它为所谓的蛤蜊啊 the oyster。The
region is famous for its intertidal zones. Intertidal is a great word. Inter means between, and tidal means, the waves coming in and out. And what it means is fresh river water mixes with briny seawater. And because the tide goes in and out, sometimes it's more salty and sometimes it's more fresh. So it's a very sort of liminal space between the ocean and the sea.Yeah,
所以这个地区呢 is famous, region 就是地区 is famous for 以什么闻名？以他们的 intertidal zones。好 intertidal inter 是什么什么之间 tide 就是潮水，好 zone 是一个地带，所以 intertidal zones 就是潮间带。那什么叫潮间带呢？ Where fresh river water 啊，这个河水啊，这个淡水，这个 fresh 在这里就是淡水啊。fresh 是淡水的那个淡字啊，所以这个地方呢，这个河水这种淡水呢 mixes 它会跟什么混合呢？跟 briny 啊就是 salty 啊带有咸味的这个 sea water 海水啊，因为 brine 啊 brine 啊它是一种腌制食物用的这个盐水，所以潮间带呢因为有河水跟这个海水啊，所以它们有的时候会咸一点，有时候会淡一点。
This unique convergence,A convergence is the meeting of two things or the mixing of two things, and that would be the salt water and the fresh water, creates an environment, a watery environment, which is rich in organic elements. There's a lot going on in that water. The water contains lots of different types of particles from the land and from the ocean and mixes them together, making it rich in these elements and perfect.For not only oysters, which love this kind of environment, but many kinds of fish, shrimp, and crabs as well.
好，所以这个 unique 这个独特的 convergence 就是一个汇合啊 ，con 就是 together 啊，那个 verge 它的字根就是 incline 啊，就往哪里倾斜的那个意思啊 ，incline，所以往同一个地方倾斜过去的就是汇合啊，所以。这个独特的潮间带的这个海水淡水的汇合呢creates 它就创造了一个环境，一个 environment which 这个 environment which 就指这个环境呢 is rich in 就是富于它富有什么它有很多的什么呢？有很多的 organic elements 有机的元素，然后呢它是 perfect for 这个 perfect 在这里是指非常理想这个 exactly fitting the need或者 ideal for 所以这个非常理想对于什么来讲非常理想呢 ？For not only oysters， 不但对这个蛤蜊来讲很理想，而且呢fish 还有鱼或者这个虾类 shrimp 或者是 crabs 蟹类 as well。那各位注意到这个 not only but also 这个 but also 后面那个 also 有的时候不写然后呢 用这个 as well 来代替，但是 as well 会放在句尾啊，那这个例子就很清楚啊。For not only oysters, but fish, shrimp, and crabs as well. 那 as well 放在句尾，但是前面那个 but 那个 also 就不见了。
So the area is also known for the particular way its residents harvest and transport their oysters via the use of sea buffaloes. These are not buffaloes from the sea, but buffaloes who walk in the sea. Although buffaloes from the sea would be an incredibly cool thing. Mermaid buffaloes. So the residents harvest and transport their oysters with these sea buffaloes. So they take the oysters from the seabed and they carry them back to their village with the sea buffaloes.
好，所以 the area 这一个地区呢 is also known for 它也很知名的是它的 particular way, particular 就是特别的、特定的一种方式啊。以这种方式呢，它的 residents 在这个地方的居民，他们 harvest 采收啊，那或还有同时 transport 运输他们的 oysters 好，所以这个地方的居民呢，他们有特别的采收跟运送他们的这个蛤蜊的方式啊。然后呢，这个方法是 via 或者 via 啊，那刚刚注意到这Bruce 老师念 via 啊，那个Angela 老师念 via， 所以两个发音都是对的啊。然后呢，他们透过什么 the use of， 他们透过使用 sea buffaloes， 就是这个我们讲这个海水牛，其实指的就是水牛啦，这个是方圆一带的习惯称呼啊，它其实指的就是水牛，因为他们会在海里面走，大概这样。
In the past, local farmers making a living from the sea were unable to properly operate motorized vehicles for oyster harvesting. In the past, before now, local farmers in the Fangyuan area made a living from the sea. They did not grow pineapples or rice, or they were not land farmers. They were, in a sense, sea farmers. They could not very well use motorized vehicles because of this environment where water comes in, water comes out. There are a lot of stones and rocks. It's very hard to navigate to properly move your vehicles around in order to harvest oysters.
所以 in the past, 以前啊 local farmers 啊 local farmers 就是当地的农民啊，那 making a living from the sea 啊，那这些农民是以海为生的，靠海为生的啊，这个 make a living 就是营生为生啊，那从海里面为生，靠海为生的这些当地的农民呢 were unable to， 他们没有办法 properly 适当地 operate 操作好 motorized vehicles 好 motorized 就是以马达为动力的啊，这些这个 vehicles 这些这个车辆啊等等的啊，那用来干嘛呢？用来采收这个 oyster 啊 for oyster harvesting 啊，大概因为他们在这个地方不适合啊有那种以马达为动力的那种采收的机械啊，他们没有办法适当地使用，所以他们才会想别的办法。
Instead, they discovered that carriages or carts pulled by water buffaloes were easier to use and much more maneuverable. I guess the difference between a carriage and a cart is that a carriage has 4 wheels and a cart has 2, generally.
I agree.
And maneuverable means they're easier to move around.
好，所以呢 instead 换句话说他们就不用这个 motorized vehicles 了啊，取而代之的是他们发现到carriages 啊 carriages 就是这个 a wheeled vehicle 啊，就有轮子的车啊，可能4个轮子，可能2个轮子啊。然后呢，这个pulled by water buffaloes 啊，它由这个水牛来拉的这个轮车啊，他们觉得这是 easier to use 比较好用，而且呢 much more maneuverable 就是容易操控的啊，所以这个觉得比较好用，而且呢比较容易操控啊，因为牛嘛啊，它牛是有生命的啊，你跟它好好的培养感情，它就会听你的。
Over time, with the passing of time, this method began dying out, this method of using the sueño, the water buffalo. They were replaced the water buffalo were replaced by more modern ones, even though we just said, at least at first, using carriages or carts was very, very difficult. Well, there are other types of vehicles, modern vehicles, that can negotiate very difficult terrain.
好，所以 over time 就是随着时间的推移，渐渐的 this method 这个方法 began 开始 dying out。好，这个 die out 就是 to become extinct， extinct 绝迹，extinct 所以 dying out to become extinct to cease to exist 停止了，不存在了，所以慢慢就这个消失了。然后呢 replaced by 这个是分词构句 being replaced by 他们由什么取代呢？由 more modern 比较现代的 ones 就是指 methods 所以有比较现代的方法来取代这个旧的这种方法。
In the early 2000s, a man named Wei Qingshui decided to turn the declining tradition into a tourist attraction. This is something that's been happening all over Asia, but it's a particularly nice thing to do here, I think. If you turn something into something else, it means you make something become something else.
Mm-hmm. You change it.
You change it. So he's turning what used to be a declining tradition, like something that people are doing less and less, into a tourist attraction, something that can be kept doing, but now as an experience for people rather than for doing actual work.
好，所以呢，在这个21世纪这个早期的时候呢就或者是这个21世纪刚开始的时候呢，有一个人他的名字 a man named 魏清水他 decided to 他决定要turn A into B 把 A 变成 B 那在这里 A 就是 the declining tradition declining 就是衰退中的这个衰弱衰退中的这样的一个传统呢，把它改变 turn into 把它变成一个 tourist attraction 一个变成一个旅游的一个景点一个卖点attraction 可以说是个卖点。
Visitors board oyster harvesting ox carts. Ox carts are carriages or carts that are pulled by oxen, in this case water buffaloes. Board means to get on board. The visitors step up and into an area where the cart will hold people and the things that they are carrying. And all of this is ferried or carried through the intertidal zones, those areas of seashore which are sometimes more briny, they have more salt, and at other times when the tide goes out, then water is replenished from rivers, which is fresh water.
好，所以呢，我们可以看到 visitors 这些游客board 就是登上这个 oyster harvesting ox carts 就是这个采蛤的这些牛车因为用牛拉的嘛然后呢 and are ferried 这个 ferried 在这里其实就 to transport 的意思，它本来是渡船的那个意思to transport by boat across a body of water， 那在这里有类似的意思，因为他们好像是因为那个地方是有水的所以他们就 are ferried through 穿过这个潮间带所以他们做这样的一个它这种体验。
They can then don rubber boots and gloves and get a chance to also pick their own fiddler crabs and clams from the muddy water during low tide. If you don something, you put them on. So you should put on rubber boots and gloves if you're going to run around in an intertidal area because those rocks are sharp. You can cut yourself. And then picking up fiddler crabs and clams for dinner for yourself sounds like a fantastic time.
好，所以他们就接下来他们就可以这个 don 在这里呢 don 是这个 put on clothing 的意思就穿上的意思。那常常会看到这个字后面接的是手套，所以戴手套这个动作常常是用 don 这个字to don one's gloves。那在这里呢，它是穿上什么 rubber boots 橡胶鞋橡胶靴子也就是像我们讲的雨鞋啦然后呢还有 gloves 还有橡胶手套然后呢 and get a chance to 他们就可以有一个机会可以 also 同时也可以pick their own 就是 pick 在这里其实是抓的意思 这也是 harvest 的意思，或者是 gather 的意思哈，去抓他们自己的 fiddler crabs， 就是这个我们叫做招潮蟹啊。那个 fiddler 其实是小提琴手啊，我猜啦，我或者有一个印象，好像是因为他们这个蟹那两只这个螯举起来的时候，好像在拉小提琴那样子啊，不知道是不是这样子啊？我好像有这么一个印象啊。如果错的话呢，就大家就不好意思啊。然后呢，这个我只觉得很可爱而已，好像拉小提琴一样啊。Anyway， 所以呢，这个 and clams 或者上面可以抓一些蛤蜊啊。那从这个 muddy water 啊 ，muddy 就是这个 filled with mud， 里面是有泥的啊，所以泥水啊。那 during low tide 啊，退潮叫 low tide， 所以退潮的时候呢，他们就可以穿上靴子啊，穿上这个橡胶靴，然后戴上手套，好，然后呢有一个机会啊，去在这个泥水里面呢去抓这个招潮蟹还有蛤蜊。
At the conclusion of the tour, when the tour ends, visitors can sample freshly harvested oyster delicacies. There's always a place in a tourist area where you go to buy things, and in this case, if you enjoy seafood, they will have a lot of different kinds of seafood, and they specialize in oyster delicacies, ways to prepare oysters that you might not know about, but it's fresh oysters, so it can't be bad.
啊，没错哈，这新鲜的一定很好吃。好，所以我们看到这个句，他说 at the conclusion of the tour， 好，所以这个旅程结束的时候 ，conclusion 就是结束的时候啊。那这些游客呢，可以 sample， 可以品尝 freshly harvested， 就是新鲜采收的啊，这个 oyster， 这个蛤蜊的这个 delicacies 美食啊。所以刚刚新鲜的，那他们会有一些方法啊，让你尝尝这些新鲜的美食。
So Mr. Wei is very passionate about the sea buffaloes and the traditional way of harvesting oysters. He sounds like he'd be fun to talk to.
Yeah, 那魏先生呢 is very passionate about 啊，他很热衷于、很热爱这些这个sea buffaloes 啊，还有他也很喜欢啊，很热爱这个传统的方式 the traditional way of 这个采收 oyster 这种传统方式，他非常喜欢。
He knows that the wetlands in the southwest of the county are crucial for this way of life. Mr. Wei, he understands his environment. They can be called wetlands. There are other words in English to use besides seashore. You could have swamp or marsh or bog, but don't worry about those words. He has plans to petition because he loves his environment and the way of life there. He wants to ask UNESCO, which is a United Nations group that has World Heritage sites around the world of places which are unique. They are special either from their natural or their human activity in those special areas. And they end this with wetland ecosystem. Those are incredibly rich and varied areas of seawater and fresh water with birds and mollusks and worms and insects and an amazing variety of life. And we have it right here in Taiwan in Changhua County.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, 所以他说 he knows that 他知道了 the wetlands 就是这个湿地哈，在这个这一个彰化县啊 ，the county 在这里指的是彰化县啊，它不是指芳苑乡，因为芳苑是个乡啊。那这个整篇文章只提到了一个 county， 所以他在这个地方可以用 the county 来表示彰化县啊。如果说这文章有出现到其他的 county 的话，他就不能直接这样子讲一个 the county 啊，因为这样读者就不知道是哪一个 county。所以在彰化这个彰化县呢啊西南边啊，那这些 wetlands 这些湿地啊，他知道呢是 are crucial for this way of life 啊 ，to be crucial for 就是很关键的 extremely important 啊，对于他们这种生活方式非常的重要啊。然后呢 has plans to 他有一些计划要 petition 要请愿要申请啊，这个UNESCO 啊，这个来 grant 在这里就是 批准或者给予或者授予这个 World Heritage Site 就是世界文化遗产，所以他有计划要向联合国教科文组织这个申请，给这一套湿地生态系统给它世界遗产的一个地位那后面最后这个 The Wetland Ecosystem 就是湿地生态系统那给它一个 World Heritage Site Status 是地位所以他计划要跟联合国教科文组织申请一下希望能够这个赋予能够授予这一套湿地生态系统一个世界遗产的地位。
Now that we're finished with today's article, we have a couple of reading comprehension questions for you. The first is, what special feature makes Fangyuan Township so fertile for sea life? Well, it's because it's located in an intertidal zone where salt water and fresh water mix.
所以是什么特别的东西让这个芳苑乡对于海洋生物来讲是这么肥沃的一个地方呢？fertile 就是很肥沃的意思那答案就是因为在这里呢，这个淡水跟河水在这里 converge， 在这里这个交汇那产生了一个潮间带，所以这里的生态系统很丰富。
And number 2, why did the original oyster farmers begin using sea buffalo carts?
那原来的这些蛤蜊的这些农民呢，为什么会开始使用 sea buffalo carts?
I think it's because the motorized vehicles were hard to use. It says that they were unable to properly operate motorized vehicles, but in the second sentence they said that carriages pulled by water buffaloes were easier to use and much more maneuverable, which implies that the motorized vehicles were hard to move around, and buffaloes were easier.
Yeah, 那答案在文章里面有提到因为在这个潮间带呢，如果你有马达的这个机械呢，不容易操作那如果是用牛车的话，那比较容易操作，而且比较适合这个地方。
Okay, that's it for today's lesson. You guys go out and have a great time tomorrow night and join us in January 2022. We'll
Yay.
be right here for you. Till then,
bye-bye.